Saharim Tovim. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bob Lowy, and I'm proud to be the current chair of the Baltimore Jewish Council's Holocaust Remembrance Commission. On behalf of the Commission and the Baltimore Jewish Council, and a lifelong member of Har Sinai Ob Shalom congregation, I'm pleased to welcome you here today for the 2024 Yom HaShoah commemoration. After what has been a challenging and difficult year for the global Jewish community, it is beyond meaningful that we can come together as a community to memorialize the 6 million Jewish lives and millions of others lost senselessly during the Holocaust. We will begin our program with the singing of the Star-Spangled Banner, led by Cantor Alexandra Marcus. Please rise.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
I'd like to now welcome Rabbi Rachel Sabbath Baker, Mike? Okay, sorry about that. I'd like to now welcome Rabbi Rachel Sabbath Beit Halachmi, PhD, inaugural Senior Rabbi of Har Sinai Ob Shalom congregation.
Thank you so much, Bob. On behalf of our Board of Trustees, many of whom are here, and on behalf of Cantor Marcus and myself, I want to welcome all of you here today to our Greenebaum Sanctuary. We're gathered here today on a day that is so very significant in many ways. First of all, of course, it is Yom HaShoah, a day when we come together to remember and to commemorate, a day when we come together to say loudly and clearly, never again. And yet, on this 12th day of the Omer, as we count our way from Passover, from Pesach to Shavuot, from Exodus to receiving the Torah, we're also very aware of the fact that it is day, how many days is it of the war? 212 days of this war, 212 days that our brothers and sisters have been held in captivity. And so I want us to pause for just a moment to remember those who we have lost on and since October 7th. Pause and remember those who we have lost in recent days, in just the last few days. It has been made known to us that some who we thought were being held hostage are in fact additional martyrs of our people. We call out to God as one people of Israel that God protect all of the hostages, that God protect the Israel Defense Forces, that God protect all of the house of Israel, all of us, all who dwell in the house of Israel, and all of humanity, to which we say together, Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi. Today we gather to recognize the atrocities of HaShoah and to remember the millions of innocent lives senselessly taken, as well as the millions of innocent lives forever altered at the hands of the Nazi regime. In the year 2024, we recognize 79 years since liberation, 79 years since the largest state-sponsored act of targeted violence against the Jewish people. However, we cannot gather here today and ignore the horrors of what the Jewish community has experienced just in the past 6 months. Less than 80 years after the camps were liberated and the Nazi regime was defeated, we experienced the next most deadly day for Jewish individuals in modern history. On October 7th, 2023, the world watched as our brothers and sisters in Israel, Jewish and non-Jewish, were attacked on the holiday Shemini Atzeret. Over 1,000 innocent lives were taken, and hundreds of innocent men, women, and children were taken hostage. Not since the days of the Holocaust have the Jewish people seen such targeted violence. Today, I ask each and every one of you to renew the call again of never again, a vow that was broken on October 7th that sparked an unprecedented surge of global anti-Semitism. Today, we are fortunate to be joined by this year's Shinshanim, Israeli high school graduates who have taken a year of service to be educators in our Baltimore community. We know that their time away from home must be challenging this year more than ever. The Baltimore community is honored to stand in support of them. While we continue to send support from our community of Baltimore to our loved ones in Israel, we are reminded more than ever of the necessity to commemorate days like today. Without knowing the stories of the Holocaust, with less and less witnesses of its horrors here to tell the stories of loss, survival, bravery, and triumph, we cannot rely on history alone to not repeat itself in a time where rates of reported anti-Semitism have increased over 300% within a single year nationally and over 200% right here in Maryland. This is why we have all joined here today, to commemorate the millions of stolen lives, honor the survivors of the Shoah and their inspiring courage, and stand proud of the resilience of the global Jewish community. This year's theme recognizes the importance of education and commemoration. Many of us in this room or watching online, including myself, are descendants of Holocaust survivors. Today, we recognize the responsibility and mitzvah that our children, grandchildren, other loved ones of our brave ancestors have to ensure the miraculous stories of their loved ones, that they are heard not just on days such as today, but forevermore in the future. Our program today is made possible because of the ongoing generosity of community sponsors, including the Glick and Liebman families, who through the David and Rose Glick Yom HaShoah Endowment Fund have supported the Yom HaShoah program since 1986. We are also grateful to the Associated Jewish Federation of Baltimore for its continuing support. The dedication of these families and organizations to Holocaust remembrance will help our community ensure never again. We also thank our friends at Har Sinai Ob Shalom congregation for their partnership in hosting this community commemoration. The BJC appreciates the continuing support exhibited by the large number of allies from our levels of government who share this commemoration with us today. We are honored to have these elected officials join us and would like to recognize them. Please, I don't know who they are, but if you are an elected official, check my phone. I don't have my phone on me. I'm so sorry. Delegate Dana Stein. I'm sorry? And Michael Jackson. Could you stand and be recognized, please? Carl Jackson. Delegate Carl Jackson. I'm so sorry. If by chance, if there's anyone else who is here that I did not call, please stand and be recognized. Okay, thank you. I didn't want it ringing. The Baltimore Jewish Council takes pride in being a constituent agency of the Associated Jewish Federation of Baltimore. The support of the Associated is what makes possible programs like today, and so much of our work in the areas of Holocaust commemoration and education. Representing our parent agency today is Andrew Kushner, the incoming president and CEO.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Bob. Thank you to the Baltimore Jewish Council for bringing us all together today. Today is one of my first formal engagements as the new CEO of the Associated, and I couldn't be more proud. It's a privilege to be the new executive leader of this amazing organization and part of our extraordinary Baltimore Jewish community. I have been in Baltimore for, believe it or not, 1 month. And I have admired the welcoming, cohesive, multifaceted community we share. Again, thank you to everybody who made today possible. I also want to recognize all of the survivors and family members of survivors who are here today. The Associated Network's efforts to support and honor the hundreds of survivors in the Baltimore community is core to who we are. We are also deeply committed to remembering the 6 million members of our community that perished in the Holocaust. As we all know and has been mentioned, and as we all feel deeply, this year's Yom HaShoah comes at a perilous time for our community locally and for Jews in Israel and around the world. As we are just 7 months post the terror of October 7th, the world is experiencing a massive and concerning surge of anti-Semitism, with many Jews around the country, on college campuses, in high schools, including those right here in Baltimore, experiencing a new reality as we respond to anti-Semitic tropes, misinformation, and Jews being excluded. Activities that we thought were lost in the dustbin of history have come back alive in frightening ways. This current climate is unacceptable and demonstrates the importance of the collective work we do in educating the community about anti-Semitism and the Holocaust, in building allies, and in advocating at the local, state, and national level to demonstrate our collective unity. We continue to fight for protection of all Jews to live and pray without fearing for their safety, and we call upon all community leaders, from university heads to civic and religious partners, to join us in our efforts. We must collectively continue the critical work of sharing the lessons of the Shoah to ensure that anti-Semitism and hate has absolutely no place in our society. In these times when we are reminded daily that hate and ignorance exist, we will continue and grow our work. Today's program, focusing on honoring the legacies of local survivors through the brave work of their descendants who carry on their stories and names for future generations to hear, is vitally important. We are grateful to the second and third generation family members we will hear from today by continuing to bear witness for their family's tragedy. I look forward to learning along with all of you from today's important program. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Senator Ben Cardin has been a longtime friend to and member of our community, our city, state, and country. As an elected official and currently the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Cardin has and is passionately committed to fighting anti-Semitism and hate, both here and around the world. Senator Cardin is traveling today as part of his official duties in his final year in office, but he was gracious enough to record his brief remarks.
Hi, I'm Senator Ben Cardin and the chair of the United States Senate Foreign Relations Committee. It is an honor to have the opportunity to speak to you today as you commemorate Yom HaShoah with the Baltimore Jewish Council. It has never been more important to honor the legacies of the Holocaust survivors from our local community who have lived through the brutal Nazi terror. Last year, on October 7th, we saw the same level of savage violence in the attacks on innocent Israelis. Attacks that forced Jews to hide for their lives with their families, as so many of our relatives did 80 years ago. So this year, as we commemorate Yom HaShoah and remember the 6 million Jews who perished in the Holocaust, let us also say a prayer for those victims of the Hamas attack. Let us join together in support for those who were taken into captivity in Gaza and their families who still await the return of their loved ones. And while it may be difficult, let us not give up hope. Hope that with perseverance and patience, we can overcome ignorance and hatred and bigotry to create a better, safer world for future generations. And I'd like to conclude with a quote from Anne Frank's diary that to me underscores the importance of having faith, especially in such challenging times. She wrote, "I see the world being slowly transformed into wilderness. I hear the approaching thunder that one day will destroy us too. I feel the sufferings of millions. And yet, when I look up at the sky, I somehow feel that everything will change for the better, that this cruelty too shall end, that peace and tranquility will return once more. I pray for the return of peace and tranquility for all of us. Thank you."
Thank you, Senator Cardin. I would now like to call up the Ponzak Greenblatt family to share an exciting announcement about the Family's Award for Excellence in Holocaust Education.
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Ponzak.
And I'm Shoshi Ponzak, and these are our children, Serena, Caleb, and Anna.
Since 2000, the Ponzak Greenblatt Families Award for Excellence in Holocaust Education has been given to local leaders and educators who pursue Holocaust teaching and programming with an inspired dedication. The recipients have spanned religious denominations and boundaries. We are honored to give this annual award in memory of my grandparents, Morris and Anna Greenblatt, and parents, Frida and Samuel Ponzak, all survivors of the Holocaust. This year, given the events of October 7th and the month since, we thought the award should be given to someone who has made an extraordinary commitment to education about Israel for both students and the broader community. This year, it is our pleasure to present the award to Dr. Neil Rubin, Chair of the Department of Jewish History at Beth Tfilah Dahan High School.
In addition to his work at Beth Tfilah, Neil has had a varied and impactful career across our Jewish community. He has taught at Towson University's Baltimore Hebrew Institute and UMBC. He recently completed a 3-part lecture series to future priests at St. Mary's Seminary on the history and legacy of the Holocaust. For the past 2 summers, he was the American educator for the Elijah Cummings Youth Program month-long Israel trip. In 2010, Dr. Rubin received his PhD from Towson University, as well as the Israel Studies Prize. His thesis, American Jewry and the Oslo Years, was published 2 years later as a book. Prior to embarking on a full-time teaching career, he served as editor of the Atlanta Jewish Times, senior editor of the Baltimore Jewish Times, and contributing editor of several other publications. What has been particularly remarkable about Neil's work since October 7th has been his unflagging spirit and enthusiasm to educate diverse communities about the history of Israel and the current conflict. Thanks to his reputation for intellectual honesty, he has been called upon time and again to speak to different settings of students and adults. We need these kind of trusted teachers to help dispel the myths, and when it comes to trusted teachers in the Baltimore community about the Israel-Hamas conflict, Neil is at the top of virtually everyone's list. We are honored to present our Family's Award to Neil this year, to thank him for his efforts, and to welcome him up here to say a few words.
I'm deeply honored to receive this recognition, one I dedicate to the memory of my Uncle Jake, Jake Bark. Uncle Jake was with Patton's Third Army when they liberated Dachau. I vividly remember the coldness I felt when I was there, one very warm summer day many years ago, as well as what I felt at Auschwitz and Majdanek when I was with Beth Tefillah students just a few years ago. Frankly, I'd rather forget those memories, but I understand our obligation to ruminate upon them. You know, in my lifetime, the American Jewish community has accomplished a Herculean task. We have literally cemented the infrastructure of Holocaust memory. In 2024, across the country, we have quality museums, school programs for all ages, much-needed hate crimes legislation, and countless civic ceremonies. But to understate, we live in a very challenging time for Jews here and in the world. I'm not solely speaking of the public rancor visibly accompanying our passions to have a democratic Jewish state of Israel. I note our colossal challenge when it comes to the Shoah's memory and making it relevant to the next generation. It's something we actually failed to do 532 years ago when it came from the expulsion of Spain. Nobody today talks about Torquemada as the definition of evil and the toxic mix of religion and state. Thus, with the mechanism of Shoah memory in place, which must continue to be fully utilized, it's time to enhance our efforts to mine and teach the nearly unfathomable world of the moral dilemmas of the Shoah. Let me give you an example. Should our militaries use information from Nazi experiments on pilots who were downed in frozen seas, the Nazis took POWs, dressed them in uniforms of their pilots, and put them in near freezing temperatures to see how long they would live, which would inform their rescue missions, how much time and energy to give. Should we use that information today to save American and other lives? If we do we encourage such experimentation? If we can tastefully teach and address such horrors, the Nazi era becomes relevant in new ways to a new generation, one understandably overwhelmed by a cultural worship of vacuous videos and mindless distraction, one desensitized to the actual horrors that human beings can place upon one another. Yet to do this well, we must figuratively weave 6 million strands of Jewish identity into the pedagogy of teaching about the Holocaust, while fearlessly teaching its particularity to Jews and universality to non-Jews. If we fail to do so, I actually do believe that the Shoah will become a depressing bedrock of Jewish identity for some and simply avoided by many others. This effort is going to force us into difficult conversations within and outside of the Jewish community. However, I've always believed that when conducted with integrity, difficult conversations bring creativity and meaningful identity. As we embark on this part of our collective journey together, of our collective consciousness, let us be guided by the ancient teaching of our people. I paraphrase, "The day is short, the work is plentiful. It is not our duty to finish the task at hand, but neither are we at liberty to desist from it." So thank you for this, and thank you for understanding our joint path as we must move forward.
Thank you and congratulations. The Baltimore Jewish Council's Holocaust Survivors Speakers Bureau is a decades-old bureau that was once composed of dozens of Holocaust survivors and liberators who bravely shared their personal experiences of the Holocaust and World War II with students, community groups, religious institutions, and much more across the state. One of the most valuable tools for teaching the Holocaust is to hear the stories of those personally impacted by it, of those who were forced to flee their homes, go into hiding, part from their families, sometimes never to see them again. They joined the resistance, took on false identities, and survived the unthinkable in ghettos, in concentration camps, and on death marches. Each individual story matters, and every story is a unique learning opportunity for students and others to learn about the magnitude of the Holocaust. Today, the Speakers Bureau continues to provide important Holocaust testimony to these groups, but it looks a little different than it did over 20 years ago. While we are so fortunate to have a number of survivors who still dedicate their time to share their stories, we have also lost a number of our survivor speakers. As we all know, we are currently living amongst the last generation of witnesses of the Shoah. Today's Speakers Bureau boasts a number of speakers who are what we call a second and third generation survivors, children and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors. As a second generation survivor myself, I can speak personally to the mitzvah of sharing my parents' stories to ensure that their legacies live on for future generations to bear witness to. The Baltimore Jewish Council remains invested in ensuring that Holocaust testimony does not end with this last generation of survivors. We are fortunate that for so many years we have had numerous individuals come forward and take on the difficult but important responsibility of sharing their family members' stories. But the demand far outweighed the number of speakers available. This past year, the Council hired an incredible organization called Teach the Shoah to work with a cohort of local descendants of survivors to train them on how they can share the stories of their loved ones' Holocaust experience to help educate our community. There is no education tool as impactful as testimony, and nothing more effective than putting a face and a name to the stories being told. Certainly more meaningful than seeing victims and survivors as numbers in a textbook. We hope that this is just the beginning of a new era of our Speakers Bureau in which children as well as grandchildren of survivors take up the mantle of their ancestors' willingness to educate the world of their struggles and their triumphs. Truly, as our ancestors would have wanted us to say at this time, L'Dor Vador. Heller Kreshtul is a longtime member of the Speakers Bureau who has shared her mother's story with hundreds of students and adults alike. We are honored to welcome Heller today to share those experiences with all of us.
As a young child growing up in rural Pennsylvania, I was puzzled when my young friends asked me questions about my mom. Your mom talks funny. My dad says your mom isn't from America. I don't like the way your mom talks. What did they mean? My mom sounded like my mom. When people asked my mom about her accent, it was easy to see it was not something she wished to discuss. I'm an American citizen, just like you, she would often respond. One day, at about 14 years old, and quite by accident, I came upon the word Holocaust for the first time ever. I read that 6 million Jews were murdered only because they were Jewish. Growing up in a home where Israel and the welfare of the Jewish people was paramount, I hurried home to tell my mom what I had just learned. Certainly, if she knew about it, she would have told me. It was on that day that I learned that my parents had both been born in Częstochowa, Poland. They had lost most of their families, and they themselves had been in and out of ghettos and concentration camps. No other stories were shared on that day, and I was told never to tell anyone that my family had been victims of the Holocaust. And for the next 20 years, I rarely, if ever, asked another question. As a young parent, and almost on a whim, I traveled to Częstochowa. I went to the place that was a tremendous part of me, but yet I knew nothing about. I found 2 plaques commemorating the murder of Częstochowa Jews and a neglected cemetery, all that was left of a once thriving community of 30,000 Jews. What would my children think if they one day returned to Pikesville and found no evidence of the robust Jewish community in which they grew up? No Hizuk Amuna, no Krieger Schechter Day School, no JCC or 7 Mile Market, all of the places that have been a great part of their lives. Upon returning from Poland, I begged my mom to write down what she remembered. Many years passed, and one day she gave me this. It came with a request that I not read it until after her death. My mother's years from 1939 to 1944 were spent in the ghetto of Częstochowa and the concentration camp of HaShoah, also located in Częstochowa. Until December of 1944, she worked as a slave laborer at HaShoah. In December of 1944, she and my grandmother were taken to Ravensbrück, a large women's camp near Berlin. Together, they were liberated on May 4th, 1945, 79 years ago yesterday. A survivor once told me that all the paper in the world would not be enough to tell the story of the Holocaust. I would like to share pieces of my mom's story using her own words. Life in the 1930s, in spite of rising anti-Semitism, was very precious, as we were young and carried so many dreams. My entire life was right on our street. We played together and had discussions. We attended American movies with Polish subtitles. Our cousin was the owner of a small library, and she let me read the very first Polish translation of Gone with the Wind. This life filled us completely with a sense of security and belonging. Our elders never discussed in our presence the changing role of the Jews in Europe in the 1930s. The last week of August 1939 saw Polish soldiers mobilized, and my Uncle Henrik, being an officer in the Polish army, joined the forces. I still remember how he cried saying goodbye to his family. We never saw him again. A tiny snowball was turning into an avalanche while the world was watching and didn't pay too much attention to the outcome. When help finally arrived, it was much, much too late for 6 million innocent souls who only wanted to live, work, build, love, and dream. The tragic chain of events started on Friday, September 1st, 1939. On September 4th, Częstochowa suffered a bloody pogrom and over 1,000 were killed. On September 22nd, 1942, we began Yom Kippur. Around 4 p.m., we were totally surrounded by guns, dogs, and hundreds of German police. That night was our last in our beloved home. Through loudspeakers, Germans announced to leave everything and come down. Terrified men, women, and children marched in front of the selection committee. This was the most bloody selection. Out of thousands and thousands of horrified Jews, only a handful survived. From our entire closest family, we lost a total of 37 people in one day's time. Although we didn't believe that those taken would truly be resettled, but we also wondered, how could the most cultured nation in the world, in addition to all free and democratic nations, permit such subhuman slaughter? Our brave Jewish boys staged an uprising. They had some guns and put them to use. A few German soldiers, for the first time, were killed by Jewish hands, but retaliation was bloody. Every 10th woman was shot in our presence. I was 8th, and a red-headed Jewish girl was 10th. She lost her life while we were watching. We who survived had to remove all the corpses. Some of them were my friends. HaShoah, since our moving in status, turned from a labor to a concentration camp. Electric fences were installed and many more SS men were brought in. In the morning, charred bodies of people could be found hanging on the fence. These were people who committed suicide or wanted to run away. I never thought about finishing my life this way, and I'm still puzzled whether under the circumstances I was a coward or an optimist who yearned to stay alive. In December of 1944, my mother and I were chosen for a selection. I've never returned to Częstochowa. This is how I left my hometown forever. The train stopped on a crystal clear afternoon, and high above us was a sign, Ravensbrück. One day during a selection, my mother was told to go to the left. My mother was taken away, and women prisoners had to restrain me. By this action, I had nothing to live for. What a horror to return to the barracks all by myself. What was the use to fight anymore? For what reason and purpose? But in order to survive another day, I was constantly thinking of my mother's most supreme sacrifice in the camp. On a daily basis, she would offer me her bread ration, always claiming she was not hungry. Indeed, she was, but her choice pointed to one direction only, that she wanted me to live. By then, it was the beginning of February 1945. My position as ditch digger was terminated, and I was picked to remove corpses from barracks. On a stretcher, I've performed this most painful task of my lifetime, mainly because they were all so young. Every young woman that I had the honor to handle on her final trip to her well-deserved eternity, my heart was full of prayers to the Almighty. One day I was told by an inmate that Ravensbrück had several satellite camps in close proximity. I volunteered to clean a camp called Judenlager. There, in a corner of the barrack, was a group of women, and there was my mother. Early the next morning, selection took place, and this time both of us were picked, but at least we would die together. We were placed into a cattle car. After many weeks, the train came to a full stop. German guards got off first. Many buses were waiting on the side, and we became panicky, not knowing what will happen next. Loudspeakers announced in several languages that the day is May 4th, 1945, 6 p.m. We've reached Denmark, and the International Red Cross is now in charge of us. As a young girl, I always had a dream to own and live on a farm. Even this dream came true. Our magnificent farm brought me beauty and peace and reminds me of my own Garden of Eden. It would be impossible to forget our horses, our dogs, our goats, and our chickens. All of this made me extremely happy, peaceful, and grateful. I love living in the country, and this feeling fulfills me completely. There's a void, however, that will never be filled. In 1976, I lost my sacred mother. In 1985, my beloved husband. With their passing, I lost the closest ties and bonds with the old world, which will forever remain a great part of me. But their departure was humane. They weren't shoveled into ovens of crematorias in subhuman circumstances and conditions, the way my entire family was compelled to exit this world. I'm privileged to visit their graves at the local cemetery with peace of mind, knowing and forever treasuring them, being a part of me as I'm forever a part of them.
Heller, thank you so much for sharing your mother's story with us. Delegate Sandy Rosenberg has entered, so I wanted to recognize him and thank you for coming this afternoon. Our next two speakers were both enrolled in this winter's cohort of second and third generation storytelling training and organized by the Baltimore Jewish Council and provided by Teach the Shoah. As a 2G who went through this winter's training with them and shared their journey and process, it is my honor to introduce my fellow 2G classmate, Claudia Endorsky. Claudia will share the story of her father, Heinz, and her uncle, Otto. When the story begins, Heinz, Otto, and their father are at work in their father's lighting supply store in Vienna, Austria. It is March 1938, and the Nazis have just marched into Vienna. Claudia will be telling her story in the first person, as if she is her father, Heinz.
Can you hear me? It's a busy day in my father's store. There are crowds outside cheering, and my brother Otto is telling me all about his birthday celebration. A few days, he's going to be 15. I'm 17. I look up and see a young teenager standing there in a Hitler Youth uniform with a rifle over his shoulder. I know I had seen him a few days ago. He came into the store with his father looking for work. I had recognized him. My father, who's a big man, is kind of a softy, and said, "Sure, have him come in. I'll find something for him to do." He walked up to us and he said, "This is my store. I own this store." My father, Otto, and I stopped working, looked at him, and went back to work. Then people from the outside started rushing into the store, taking the radios off the shelves, the lamps, the chandeliers, whatever they could carry. Those were our neighbors. Then two men rushed in, grabbed my father, lifted them up, took him outside to the sidewalk, pushed his face down on the sidewalk and said, "You dirty Jew, clean the sidewalk." Then two other men came, lifted him up on their shoulders, and ran down to the newly opened SS headquarters here in Vienna. They made him clean the toilets. That night, Father fled to Lvov, Poland. We had cousins there. A few days later, we got a coded message. He had arrived safely. Father had secured a nice apartment in Lvov. Mother, Otto, and I arrived in October 1938. Father had started a factory selling light bulbs. Otto and I were his door-to-door salesmen. Neither one of us spoke Polish fluently. I was looking at going to Lvov University. Otto and I had joined the young Jewish group at the synagogue. Otto and I get up at 3 o'clock in the morning. We get in line at the bakery. It opens at noon. We get a loaf of bread. It's 1939. The Russians have taken over Lvov. We get a loaf of bread and have to fight the mobs to keep the loaf of bread safe. Father has closed his factory. There's no supplies. We hear on the radio the Germans are at the Soviet border. They would be here in Lvov in a matter of days. Then the bombing started, relentless. It was 1941 in the summer. Otto and I knew we needed to leave. We didn't want our lives put in the hands of the Germans. We told Mother and Father we were leaving, packed a backpack. Mother, weeping, gave us her last reserve, a loaf of bread. Father reached into his pocket and pulled out his pocket watch. It was a square omega. He gave it to me. Otto and I went up into the forest. Our papers were ruined in the bombings. We had to figure out what to do. We got sticks and used the knives, the pocket knives Father gave us, to make them sharp so we could beat away the wild dogs in the forest. We were in the forest for days. We finally came out. We came out into the city of Tarnopol. It was in ruins. We could hear gunshots in the distance. We turned down a side street and a mob came running towards us. Kill the Jews! Kill the Jews! We could see 2 German soldiers standing on the corner. We ran to them. We are ethnic Germans. We are ethnic Germans from Danzig. They looked at us. We didn't look like Jews from Tarnopol. We didn't have yarmulkes on. We didn't have payas or long kaftans. Let's go talk to the sergeant. The sergeant listened to our story and said, Danzig? What's your address in Danzig? 73 Bahnhofstrasse, I said. Bahnhofstrasse means railroad street. Otto and I figured every city had a railroad. They must have a railroad street. The sergeant was on the phone for a long time. He put it down, came back and said, it's too late to call Danzig today. Come back tomorrow and I'll check it out. But if what you told me is not the truth, you will wish you never talked to me. It was getting late when Otto and I left. It was getting dark. We needed to find a place to stay that night. We saw a deserted bar, and in the back was a back room with a waist-high cabinet, and there was an upright piano. We took the piano, pushed it as close as we could to the cabinet. I fit on the bottom shelf, Otto fit on top, closed the cabinet. We were asleep in seconds. When we got up in the morning, our clothes were very dusty. We brushed off, fixed ourselves up a little bit, and Otto said, I had nightmares. I did too. We started to walk out of the bar, and there were naked bodies with holes in them, and swastikas etched on their bellies, and Star of David. Those were not nightmares. You came back. Your story checked out, the sergeant said. I said, yes, and I can speak, and Otto can speak, and read, and write, and translate Polish, Ukrainian, Russian, and we're both proficient typists. Sergeant said, we need translators. Go around and see Colonel Schroeder. Colonel Schroeder was a very tall man sitting at his desk. He had the riding boots on and a monocle in his eye. He looked at us and he said, how about a shower? They gave us a bar of soap, a fresh towel, underwear, and clean fatigues. We could see the showers were right down the hall. We started to walk them. Colonel Schroeder was right behind us. We kept walking. Then he said, why don't you stop and use the bathroom? He followed us to the urinal. When our older brother Kurt was born in Vienna, the moil had just disfigured a baby. Our mother Rosa was so hysterical. We were never circumcised. That saved our lives. The doctor measured my nose, the doctor measured my head. We were in the Institute for Ethnic Studies right outside of Berlin. It was 1942. We had spent our time with Colonel Schroeder as translators. The doctor came back, took pictures of our nose, our head, side view, told us to wait right there. We waited hours. Doctor came back, said, Walter Brothers, sit down. You are 100% Aryan. We had spent our time translating, and Colonel Schroeder had told us we needed to be naturalized citizens. The doctor said, now go to the Army headquarters and find out which Army unit you're assigned to. I was stunned. I made it. We were outside Salzburg, Austria. It was May 5th, 1945. We just heard the war had ended. I was a Jew in a German uniform. I walked away from my unit into the forest. Halt! There was an American GI soldier pointing his rifle at me. And I looked up and I could see next to every tree were soldiers, American soldiers, pointing their rifles at me. I'm a Jew. I'm Jewish. He looked at me. I told him the whole story, half in English, half in German. I told him my oldest brother, Kurt, lived in New York City. He said, I'm a Jew from New York City. What's his address? I told him. He looked at me and he said, if you're a Jew, say a Jewish prayer. Yikadal, Yikadash, Shumei Rabbah. I said the Mourner's Kaddish.
My name is Allison Baumwald, and I'm the Senior Vice President for Development at the Associated. But more importantly today, I am a 3G, third-generation Holocaust survivor. I recently had the opportunity to participate in the Teach the Shoah Foundation's storytelling cohort that Bob has referenced, where I learned how to share my grandmother's story in a unique and meaningful way, which has prepared me to go out into our community and our schools to share her experience during the Holocaust and ensure that the world will never forget. I also had the privilege of participating with my friend, Jessica Silverman, another 3G, and it is my honor to introduce her today, who will share her grandmother's story. Jessica grew up in New York with her grandparents around her as second parents. Both of her mother's parents were Holocaust survivors, and her grandmother, Minya Osher, was from Lodz, Poland. Jessica will share Minya's story in the first person, as if she were her grandmother.
Life in Lodz was wonderful. I lived with my parents, my 2 brothers, and my 3 sisters in an apartment behind a dairy store that we owned and operated. I loved the dairy. I loved the cheeses, the milk, and the cottage cheese. I would work in the store after school. I loved going to school. I was a good student, and I wanted to be a pharmacist when I grew up. I loved their white jackets, and I wanted to help people. I came from a religious family, one of 6 kids. My parents named me Mindel. They called me Mindela, and they gave me the nickname of Minnie, Minya, meaning strength. We celebrated all the holidays. Family would come from all over and stay with us in our apartment and even sleep on our floor. In the summers, we would vacation with my cousins Luba and Regina, and in the winters, we would go ice skating. September 1939, the Nazis invade Poland. By April 1940, they had sectioned off where we lived in Lodz from the outside world and made it a ghetto. They took away our dairy store. They took away our apartment. We had nothing. We all needed to do what we could to survive. I was forced to go work in a factory. My job was to take straw and to weave it together and make boot coverings for the SS soldiers' boots. I would wake up extra early to get to the factory so that I could pick the straw that was a little bit softer on my teenage fingertips. At the end of the day, I was given a cup of soup. That is all the food I had all day. One day, they forced a group of us in a truck, and they took us outside the Lodz Ghetto. We were taken to a large field where we were made to dig a very large ditch. The SS shouted, "Men, line up!" Then they shot them. We women had to bury them. Life in the Lodz Ghetto was unbearable. There was death, starvation, disease everywhere. I saw a rabbi holding the Torah being burned alive. I saw babies being thrown from apartment windows down to the cobblestone streets below. My mom, Perla, and my older brother, Kalman, both died from disease. I would go and sit on my mom's grave. Mommy, I miss you so much. You were my everything. August 1944, the SS were liquidating the ghetto, forcing us to leave. I braided my hair in long ringlets the way that my mom used to do it, and I put on a clean dress. I spent days in the cattle car. The train stopped and the doors opened. There was so much chaos. The SS were screaming. The dogs were barking. There was pushing and shoving. Men to one side, women to another side. Dad, Itzik! I didn't know that was going to be the last time I would see my dad and brother. I was shoved along with my sisters, Esther, Chava, and Luba, with the other women. We had to take off our clothes, put on striped work clothes, and they shaved our hair. I look at my sisters, they look at me. We don't even recognize each other, and we're standing right in front of each other. We had no hair. I look up and I see a sign. Arbeit macht frei. Work sets you free. I look up and I see red brick buildings with chimneys, with the smoke coming out of the chimneys. There was a smell of death. I overheard a woman speaking in Yiddish. I went over to her and I asked her, "Where are we?" She said, "You're in hell." As I walked by a red brick building, I took my fingers and I rubbed it against the red brick. And I took that little bit of red dust that was on my fingertips and I put it on my cheeks like rouge so that I would look healthy. We were taken to the selection. Dr. Mengele put me in one line, put my three sisters in another line. That was the end of my sisters. They were taken to the gas chambers. I was the only one from my immediate family to still be alive. Life in Auschwitz was unbearable. I was starving. I was so hungry. It is better to die from a bullet than to die from starvation. I had a cup and I would stand in line for my soup. The soup wasn't any good. It was watery cabbage soup, and you could taste the dirt in your teeth. But it was all I had. I was so hungry, I just wanted to go back and lick the rim of the container that the soup was in. So I went back in line. But the SS soldier recognized me. And he took the butt of his rifle and he knocked it into my mouth. My teeth were on the dirt floor. There was blood in my mouth. My head was throbbing. No one could help me. I couldn't help myself. I just had to take it. I ended up finding my cousins, Luba and Regina, in Auschwitz, and the three of us decided that we were going to try to stay together. One day, a woman came over and said, "Tonight, let's go on the wires." I said, "No, I'm not going to kill myself. If you want to kill yourself, go ahead. And if they're going to shoot me or I'm going to die, there's nothing I can do about that. But I have hope that tomorrow is going to be a better day. Where there's life, there's hope. I want to see how this war is going to end. I want to live." January 1944, I'm on a death march with my cousins. We've been marching for days. There's snow around us, but we're not allowed to eat it. The SS will kill us. One night, we stopped by a barn, and the SS said that we can sleep inside. We didn't have to sleep outside. It was warm in there, and there was straw. But we couldn't sleep. We were so hungry. I said to my cousin, "Stay here. I'm going to go look to see if I can find us some food." I left the barn, and nearby was a house. I opened the door, and there, the SS soldiers were sleeping. Their rifles are up against the wall, and their knapsacks. I took a knapsack, ran back to the barn, said to my cousins, "Hurry up, come meet me in the latrine out back." The three of us in the latrine open up the knapsack. There's liverwurst. There's chocolate. There's beer. We ate it all. We hadn't eaten this much in years. But what to do with the knapsack? I said to my cousins, "Not to worry. I'm going to bury it under the straw in the barn. They'll never find it." That night, we slept. The next day, the SS come, "Achtung, stand at attention." The soldier taking his pistol, shooting it in the air, wanting to know, who took my knapsack? Who took my knapsack? The other SS soldier said, "Come on, we have to go, continue the march." This is my 5th camp since Auschwitz. I'm in Bergen-Belsen. I'm sick with a fever, with typhus. I have lice all over me. My cousins are sick as well. They're laying down in a nearby barrack. There's mountains of dead bodies everywhere. The crematorium is broken. I look like a human skeleton. I have no clothes on. I'm naked. I have nothing. It's April 15th, 1945, and I see tanks coming over the barbed wire fences. What's happening? Who are these people? A tank stops nearby me, and a young man in military uniform gets out. He comes over to me, he takes off his jacket, and he puts it on me. I fall to the ground. The jacket's too heavy for me. I'm skin and bones. I give him my hand, and he helps me up. And I start talking to him, but he doesn't understand me, and I don't understand him. So I take his hand and I bring him to the barrack where my cousins are. And I say, Luba, Regina, you have to come out. You have to see what's happening here. And they said, Minya, can't you see? We're dying here. And I said, come out now. Die later. We're being liberated.
Thank you, Heller, Claudia, and Jessica, for the mitzvah you have shared with us today. What powerful experiences. My name is Howard Libet. I'm the Executive Director of the Baltimore Jewish Council. It is our privilege to manage the Survivor Speakers Bureau on behalf of the community. And we're honored by the 8 individuals who participated in the storytelling training we offered this winter with Teach the Shoah. If you are a descendant of survivors and are interested in joining the Speakers Bureau, please reach out to us at the Baltimore Jewish Council, as we'll be looking for individuals to join our next cohorts of storytelling training in the fall. We also gather here today to mourn the victims and cherish those among us who live on. This afternoon, we have invited descendants of survivors from our local community to light 6 candles in honor of and memory of the survivors and their families and the 6 million who perished in the Holocaust. 5 of the candlelighters are other members of this winter's storytelling cohort, and the 6th is the daughter of one of our speakers today and the founder of 3G Be More. Please refer to your programs for descriptions of our candlelighters and the people they are honoring with their candle. Dr. Larry Amsterdam, lighting in honor of Norbert and Ella Amsterdam, both born in Poland. Allison Baumwald, lighting in honor of Helen Solars Sadek, born in Poland. Bob Lowy, lighting in honor of his parents, Edith and Edward Lowy of Czechoslovakia. Cheryl Riker, lighting in honor of Marvin Jacobs of Poland. Sarah Silverman, lighting in honor of Reva Panzerman born in Poland, an area of Poland that is now Belarus. Alana Snyder, lighting in honor of Bernice Horan, born in Poland. We now ask the survivors among us and the descendants of survivors to please stand and be acknowledged.
We would like to remember all the survivors in our community who have passed away since our last Yom HaShoah. Please kindly stand to honor their memory with a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Please be seated. Among those that we lost in the past 12 months were two dedicated members of our Holocaust Survivors Speakers Bureau. Margie Simon, a member of the Holocaust Remembrance Commission, is honored to deliver the tribute to her friend Howard Kadenow. The tribute was written by his children, Eric and Tina Kadenow.
We lost Howard Kadenow on November 24th, 2023, at the age of 94. Many consider Howard a hero as a Jewish partisan during the Shoah, but they also loved Howard for the tremendous person that he was. From his time as a child to his passing, Howard never shirked an obligation or let anyone down. He greeted everyone as a friend. Anyone here who knew him knows exactly what I'm talking about. For many years, Howard didn't like to tell his Holocaust story because it was very painful and emotional. But later in life, he decided that it was important to describe his experience to those who would listen, and he began to talk to school children, to college students, and to other groups, both large and small. He said often that he had to tell his story for all the partisans and ghetto fighters who are no longer here, for all the other survivors who are also gone, and for all the victims, men, women, and children who were killed and who no longer have a voice. Howard's mother sacrificed her life for his and his brothers, hiding them from the Nazis when they came and staying in the house so the patrol wouldn't go looking elsewhere. The Nazis beat and then shot her, all while Howard was forced to listen. On the same day, his father was burned alive in a barn with hundreds of other Jews. After the murder of his parents and most of his extended family, Howard became a partisan in the Naruch forest of Belarus from 1942 to 1944. He lived in the woods in the freezing cold and fought the Nazis and their collaborators with his comrades. He was only bar mitzvah age at that time, but he was forced to grow up in a way that is hard for anyone these days to fully understand. Howard remembered his murdered parents with deep emotion, as well as all his uncles, aunts, and cousins, and he cherished their memory, even though it brought him great pain. After the Allied liberation in 1945, Howard migrated westward and spent years in a refugee camp in Germany called HaShoah, while he attended high school and then went on to start university in Munich. Given everything Howard had survived, he wanted to better himself, to go to medical school and be a doctor. When his family asked him how he lived among the Germans, he said, "Who would I be hurting if I just hated and was full of rage? Them or me?" Unfortunately, while at university, Howard was in a terrible open Jeep accident and was hospitalized for a year. Forced to give up his dream of becoming a doctor, Howard bravely faced that reality and worked in various jobs in Germany until he came to America in 1957 to join his brother, who had relocated there with an aunt in the immediate post-war period. Howard met his wife Esther on a blind date in Philadelphia and married her in 1961. The two, as many of you know, remained a tight-knit couple until his passing, both of them deeply dedicated to their family and their Jewish faith. In 1968, Howard opened a clothing store at the Ritchie Highways Farmers Market, and his family, now including his daughter Tina and his son Eric, moved to Baltimore, where they were active members of our community for more than 50 years. Howard owned his store for many years and later went to work at Simms, the retail clothing chain, for another 20 years. His hard work from early morning to late at night, every day for all that time, sustained his family and put his children through college and graduate school. Howard loved America with all his heart, regarding his newly adopted country as the greatest force for good anywhere in the world. After his retirement, Howard embarked on his mission with Esther of educating anyone willing to listen regarding the Holocaust and his own personal story. People listened with rapt attention to his tale of horror and redemption, and they often told him how impressive it was that he had overcome such a tragic background to become so successful. In 2013, Howard was able to return to the small village in Belarus where his parents perished. His daughter Tina took him and her mother on a journey of remembrance and love, and because Tina was an active member of the diplomatic service at the State Department, they had unusual access to places they otherwise would not have seen. They visited the likely spots where Howard's mother and father were killed, and Howard was able to say Kaddish for his parents at the location of their death and get the kind of closure he had never had before. It was hard for Howard to relive that history, but he bravely faced the trauma and was much stronger for it. Just think, Howard came to this country in 1957 with nothing. By 1961, he met and married Esther. By 1968, when he moved to Baltimore, he had a business and a home and children and was driving carpool and doing all the normal things any American family man was supposed to do. His family and friends knew him as always dependable, always loving, even though his early years permeated his consciousness and gave him great heartache throughout his life. He was a hero to his family for all these ordinary things. And I think we can all agree that the fact Howard lived his life with dignity and grace after all he went through was indeed heroic. Despite the multiple tragedies that befell him, Howard never became angry with God and never turned his back on his faith. He loved and appreciated life, and he understood that his Jewish identity was a critical thing that ultimately saved him and his fellow survivors. If Howard had done nothing but survive the Holocaust, his life would have been worthy of note. And the same could be said of his time in the Partisans, or even the dedication with which he raised his family. But that he survived as an honorable man and a believing Jew who laughed and loved and always looked on life's bright side speaks volumes about Howard Cadenau. We miss him dearly.
Thank you, Margie. I now invite Karen Bates Rosenberg to offer remarks on Herta Griffel Bates.
This is Beth. Thank you, Baltimore Jewish Council, Har Sinai Ohab Shalom, and sponsors for bringing us together for this important commemoration. It is an honor giving tribute to my mother, along with Mr. Cadenau's family. If Mom were here, she wouldn't feel worthy of such recognition. Her story is her experience of a young orphan of the Holocaust, trying her best to adjust and feel accepted in a foreign land. She felt that the word survivor should be reserved to survivors of the camps. But she had her own losses and suffering and shared her story to anyone who would listen so that others would know her simple message. There is no place in the world for hate. Mom was born in March 1933 in Vienna, Austria, 1 month after Hitler rose to power in Germany. She was the only child of Wolf and Bela Griffel. Wolf died when Mom was sick after coming home from a forced day labor camp. Bela was smart and knew that things were not going well for the Jews. She arranged for her only child to escape to America. Out of 50 children whose parents were desperate to get their children out, Mom was one of 9 accepted onto this late passage in November 1940. Only 9 children. Mom was the youngest. She was only 7 years old. Imagine. Bela told Herta that in a place called America, she'd have another Jewish mother to take care of her. Bela told Mom that they'd reunite when adults could leave too. The atmosphere at the station was pure chaos. Herta boarded a train with a suitcase almost larger than she and a doll tucked under her arm. Herta never saw her mother again. After a month-long journey by train and by boat, Mom arrived at her first of 2 foster homes in Baltimore on December 23rd. Mom recently passed just 3 months ago. I'd like to share with you part of a condolence letter my family received from her foster brother, Jerry Bear. Few people have a lasting, positive impression on a family the way Herta had on the Bears. She arrived on a Friday afternoon, pigtails down her back, and she began to speak to my mother in Yiddish. They fell in love with each other, and that friendship lasted until the day my mother passed away. For the rest of us kids, it was exciting and strange to have this pretty girl who knew no English in our home. That evening, when my father arrived home, my mother told him about Herta. He asked to see her, but no one could find her. We looked upstairs and downstairs, and eventually my father called my mother into the doorway in the kitchen. And there, in the dark, was little Herta, looking up to the top of our icebox where my mother had lit the Friday Shabbos candles. Herta stood there, impervious to the rest of us, hands over her face, praying. It was the first time I saw my parents cry. Thank you, Jerry. This letter is now another family heirloom. Mom spent the latter part of her life until she was 90, sharing her story with thousands of people. Although she never overcame her fear of public speaking, she never turned down an opportunity if she could help it. She talked, in person and online, about her experiences with adults and children at museums, synagogues, and churches, at public, private, and parochial schools, at George Washington University, and also in New Orleans. She was invited to Vienna to speak with high school students, many of whom didn't know or knew little of the Holocaust. Many students may have been second or third generation Austrians who were involved in the war. Many of her talks, especially with kids, ended with them lining up to give Mom a hug. Thank you letters mentioned the lessons the students learned from her and expressed sorrow at what she went through. And many letters mentioned the obvious love shown between my mom and my father. Mom's adjustment to life here as a child brought many psychological highs and lows through most of her life. Her story is also one of a woman, eventually learning about her childhood through amazing discoveries. The Associated's ledgers kept on all the children notes about her progress written by her social worker only years ago were found and shared with her. Our family did our own extensive internet research to locate any of the children who may have traveled with her, resulting in a celebratory meeting with Mom and 2 of them. Information uncovered by museum researchers and librarians who had the knowledge and the tools to know where to look found information about Bela's subsequent addresses and provided a peek into what her life may have been like. Just before that, Mom had finally received a yahrzeit date for Bela through Yad Vashem. New information about the life she left and even pictures of this one little girl seemed to pop up every few years over the last 20 years of her life. We couldn't believe it. In one instance, only 9 years ago, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum contacted Mom to help them authenticate a Viennese teacher's collection of curricula, photographs, and artwork from the late 1930s. The teacher had entrusted the collection to a non-Jewish neighbor shortly before she was deported. The museum found Mom because some of the drawings in the collection were signed in bold letters, Herta Griffel. She was in some of the photographs contained in this important time capsule. Mom had never seen a picture of herself at that age. She couldn't believe that she was looking at herself as a happy, confident child in a classroom of other smiling children. The museum was able to identify most of the children by name. After her initial astonishment, she was told that of those identified, Mom was the only one known to have survived. However, later, a second survivor was found, making it 2. She and Mom were thrilled to meet each other. It was amazing. I wonder how many people have been touched by my mother's experience. The leaders of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum alone calculate that hundreds of thousands of visitors have seen her story in their current exhibit, Americans and the Holocaust. And she was part of a Jewish museum exhibit in Maryland and in Vienna. And she spoke, and she spoke, and she spoke. There's a lot about her on the internet. Please Google her. Knowing these estimates toward the end of her life, I asked Mom how many people she thought her story had touched. Her answer was simple. Her answer was simple. She said, not enough. These stories of the Holocaust must be shared thoroughly and shared often, l'dor v'dor, and just as importantly, outside of our Jewish community. There are still too many people who don't know about the Shoah. Thank you.
Zichrono lebracha. May their memories be for a blessing. We now call upon Ken and Marcus once again to chant the El Mole Rachamim and Rabbi Rachel Sabbath Beit Halachmi to lead us in reciting the Mourner's Kaddish. Please stand.
מלא רחמים, שוכן במרומים, המסה מנוחה נכונה על כנפי השכינה, במעלות קרושים וטורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את כל הנשמות של 6 מיליוני היהודים, חללי השואה בערופה, שנהרגו, שנשחטו, שנשרפו, שנספו על קידוש השם בידי המרצחים הגרמנים הנאצים ועוזריהם משאר העמים. Beashvitz Treblinka, Majdanek, Mauthausen, Bergen-Belsen, Sobibor, ובשאר מחנות ההשמדה שהלכו לעולמים, ובעבור שכל הקהל מתפלל לעילוי נשמותיהם, לכן בעל הרחמים יסירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם. אדוני נחלתם בגן עדן תהא מנוחתם, ויעמדו לגורלם לקץ הימנים, ונאמר אמן.
Please remain standing as we continue. Please join me in the inside of your booklets so we can say together a special Kaddish for the 6 million. Yitgadal Auschwitz, V'yitkadash Lodz, Shmei Rabbah Ponar, Be'almei Dibrach Yerutei Babi Yar, V'yamlich Malchutei Maidanek, V'chayechon v'yomechon Birkenau, Uv'chayei Dechol Beit Yisrael Kovno, V'agala u'vizman Kariv Yanauska, V'imru Amen, Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevorach Leolam Olmei Olmaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach Theresienstadt, Yitpa'ar v'yitromam Buchenwald, V'yitnaseh v'yithadar Treblinka, V'yitale v'yithalal Vilna, Shmei Dekudesha Bergen-Belsen, Brichu le'ela Mauthausen, Min kol birchata v'shirata Dachau, Tushbechata v'nechemata Minsk, Damiran be'alma Varsha, V'imru Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chaim Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, V'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'imru amen.
Ose shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imeru amen.
May the one who blesses us with peace give strength to the peacemakers. May the one who inspires peace among all humanity inspire all of us to bring about peace, to bring about the release of the hostages, and may God bless us and all of humanity with peace. You may be seated.
Before we close our program, we wish to thank all of you for participating in this Holocaust Remembrance Day and to express our appreciation to Har Sinai Shalom congregation for their gracious hospitality and assistance in the preparation of this afternoon's program, particularly Lindsay Gaister, Montague, and Lee Sherman. We thank the Baltimore Shinshinim for their participation today and all of our co-sponsors who helped to make this day possible. For more information, please see the program booklet. Thank you to everyone who joined us in person and online for making this a true community-wide commemoration. Before we stand for Hatikva, I'd like to invite to the bima Dr. Larry Amsterdam for the singing of Ahinu, the prayer for the captives. The words to the prayer are, our family, the whole house of Israel, who are in distress or in captivity, we stand either in the sea or on dry land. May the Omnipresent have mercy upon them and take them out from darkness to light and from oppression to redemption, now swiftly and soon. Achenu kol Beit Yisrael, Achenu kol Beit Yisrael, hanetunim betzara, ובצרה ובשביה, העומדים בין ביום ובין ביבשה. אחינו כל בית ישראל, אחינו כל בית ישראל, הנתונים בצרה, בצרה ובשביה, העומדים בין בים ובין ביבשה. המקום ירחם, ירחם עליכם, ויוציאם מצרה, לרווחה, מעפלה ליורה, משיבוד לגאולה, השתה בגלה, ובזמן קריב, המקום ירחם, ירחם עליכם, ויוציאם מצרה, לרווחה, מעפלה ליורה, משיבוד לגאולה, השתה בגלה, ובזמן קריב, ובזמן קריב, ונאמר אמן. Thank you so much, Larry. Please stand as our Shinshiniim lead us in the singing of Vatikva.
כל עוד בלבב פנימה, נפש יהודי הומיה, ולפתי מזרח קדימה, עין לציון צופיה. עוד לא אבדה תקוותנו, התקווה בת שנות 2000, להיות עם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון וירושלים. להיות עם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון וירושלים.
Thank you again. This concludes our program for this afternoon.